basis do you still call yourselves either the Liberals or the Democrats?
Well, if we had a general election, which we won, as you say, it would be a big stretch going from 18 to 320, whatever it is. If we won a general election and we made it absolutely clear throughout that election that this was our objective, I don't think anybody would say that's undemocratic. I mean, that's what general elections are for. And we would vote for revocation. We already have done in the House of Commons. But no, in practical reality, and we will do well at the next election, but I think not on that scale. In reality, we're saying that we've got to revisit this, go back to the people on the basis of whatever deal the Prime Minister comes up with it. It looks as if he's trying to cook something up, which is quite similar to what Theresa May had negotiated.
Well, that's
and,
it.
We should have a referendum on the back of that.
Well, but again, the referendum that the Liberal Democrats want, and Jo Swinson's made this very clear, would be a referendum which wouldn't be a Remain-Leave referendum. It would be a Remain-Leave with a deal. Now, we already know that most of the Leavers don't want that deal. They wouldn't have a no-deal option on the table. A lot of people would say, well, quite apart from the fact that actually the polling evidence shows very clearly people don't want a second referendum on average, but also that if there were one, you shouldn't have Remain on the ballot paper because we've already answered that question.
Well, I don't think we have answered that question because the ambiguity is around what leaving actually means. And as you correctly said a minute ago, there is leaving with a deal, there's leaving without one. It looks as if increasingly, I mean, I don't know what's happening inside government, but they're talking about resurrecting Theresa May's deal with a bit of a change around the Northern Irish problem. If that happens, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to go back to the people and say, is this what you voted for when you voted to leave? I don't see a problem with that in democratic terms at all. I think it is a way of resolving it.
Voters do seem to. But again, you say you would resolve it, but Jo Swinson, your leader, has already said that if there were a vote to leave again, that she would not accept that and would still not. I mean, no one's expecting her to change her view. She thinks it's a terrible idea. Of course, she'll continue to think that. And you think it's a terrible idea, and you'll continue to think that. But she said she would still lead her party to vote down and to try and do everything they could to stop it from happening. Look, if Remain, no, she did. I spoke to her about it myself. It wasn't that she wouldn't change her mind. She would still campaign and try to stop it from happening. So if Remain won, I can tell you as a Leave voter, I'm not going to accept that. Let's go for best of three. If Leave won, she wouldn't accept it. I'm not entirely sure that a second referendum resolves anything.
Well, I think it's probably got the best prospect of resolving a terrible mess than any other. But it's certainly we're in a very difficult position, and millions of people are going to be very unhappy whatever happens. So it's a question of finding the least worst forward. I mean, I was in Parliament when Jo responded to that question about whether you accept the result. And what she was actually saying, as I understood it, was, she'll continue to argue the case for very close links between Britain and Europe.
No, I spoke to her on my show about it. She was also in another interview where she spoke and went much further. Let's also talk about it. She said she doesn't forgive David Cameron for calling a referendum. Now, last time I looked, I remember, being a political journalist at the time, Nick Clegg, former leader, formerly had a official Liberal Democrat policy for a number of years was to resolve the European Union issue with a clear in-out referendum. I've still got a copy of the leaflet that was given out. Why should David Cameron not be forgiven for calling an EU referendum that was a manifesto commitment, and he would not have won a majority government in 2015 if he hadn't made that commitment, and was a commitment that the Liberal Democrats had themselves previously made as well? Why is that unforgivable?
Of course we should have forgiveness. It's a good Christian principle.
So you do disagree with your successor then?
Well, I don't think he did make a terrible mistake, and I think he recognises
What was his mistake?
What's coming out. Yes, it was. The mistake was that in 1914, when he first broached this idea...
2014, yes.
2014, when I was in the cabinet at the time. There was no great public demand for this. I mean, there was a big row in the Tory party, but...
That's simply factually incorrect. The polling quite clearly at the time said that the majority of people wanted to have a referendum. That's completely incorrect.
Well,
UKIP had won the European elections.
Yeah, but it isn't. The people were asked to rank issues they thought were important, and health, education, housing.
They still think
and
that
Europe
now.
came about number 10. But anyway, be that as it may, we had this argument in 2014. It was very clear he didn't want a referendum, but he felt it was foisted on him by the Tory party. We persuaded him that it wasn't a great idea. But once we had left the coalition, he changed his position. I think he desperately regrets it.
Well, he didn't change his position. He had made a manifesto commitment. And I know this is weird, but people sticking by the things they say before elections it might be a new concept to Liberal Democrats, Vince, but a lot of us think it's normal political behaviour.
No, it isn't. It isn't. No. I mean, you've picked up the fact that 10 years ago we had that policy in the manifesto, and actually, you may remember the 2010 manifesto wasn't a great success. We had various other things in it which also went pear-shaped in the financial crisis. But no, I mean, in reality, David Cameron didn't expect, I think, to have a referendum. He was going to, had the coalition continued, it wouldn't have happened.
Oh, he didn't want to have one, but he'd made that commitment. It does seem to me a lot of this is smoke and mirrors, and we're no closer to a deal than we were under Theresa May.
I think what it shows you is that in this negotiation, particularly as we close in on a deal between now and the October Council, the naysayers on all sides will continue their attempts to try and either put pressure on the UK or to scupper what I think would be a good deal for both sides. But the technical details have been shared in substantially with the EU. They know what the landing zone is. Steve Bartley's been over there. David Frost, the Sherpa, who's the sort of lead of the technical teams for the Prime Minister, has been over there. But this ultimately comes back to whether the EU want to meet us halfway, do a deal that works for all sides. And if not, the Prime Minister's been clear we'll leave at the end of October.
We've said that we will not stand against those, as you rightly said. Those 28 MPs who stood very fast in favour of leaving with no deal if necessary. But we made a very good offer to Boris, which you've just mentioned, which was he needs to reduce the Labour majority. The Labour voters are not going to vote Tory. Some of them would rather cut off their own vote Tory. But they will vote for the Brexit party. And therefore we've said, look, we will go into those seats if you do not stand against us, and in return, we will not stand against an agreed number of yours. Now, to refuse that seems to me as if Boris is taking his lesson from the charge of the Light Brigade, because together we can actually succeed, but on his own, it's going to be Brexit to right of him, Brexit to left of him, Remain in front of him, volleying and thundering, and he hasn't got a chance.
If we were talking about moving to revoke Article 50 without a reference point to the people, either through a referendum or a general election, that I'd buy this, then maybe I would buy the argument that it would be undemocratic. But we're simply doing things in the usual way. And you could say, frankly, that whenever you elect a new government and they choose to take a different course, it renders null and void the position of their predecessors on whatever policy it is. Well, I'm afraid that's just how our democracy works. Now, Brexiteers, people who fervently believe in leaving the European Union like yourself, may not like that. But that is just a simple fact of how we do democracy usually in our country. And arguably, really general elections are probably a better way of determining these things, because we live in a representative parliamentary democracy.
Why do you not want there to be a general election now to decide whether we're constantly told we need a second referendum because people's views might have changed? Why do you not want there to be a general election so we can't have a general election to actually ensure that we have a House of Commons that represents the views of the people right now? What are you afraid of?
Well, we do want a general election.
You voted against one only a week ago.
We do want a general election. And again, you have one vote. That is not your only opportunity. And the issue that we have, along with pretty much all the other opposition parties apart from the DUP, is that we are absolutely up for a general election. It's not a question of whether we want a general election. It's a question of the timing. And, of course, part of the reason Boris Johnson wants to have a general election now is in his desire to try and crash us out of the European Union without a deal. And once we've got the extension implemented, which is due around the time of the 31st of October, then sure, we can have that general election because we will be comfortable that we won't be crashing out with the disaster that will pose for the British people. And don't forget, actually, I mean, Michael Gove, who is the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and co-led the Vote Leave campaign, he said that they did not advocate leaving without a deal. That was not part of the message of the campaign that he led.
I don't think, sadly, it's very difficult to guess. The Iranians have been attacking various sites around the region for a long time, including firing ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia for a number of years now. So this is completely in keeping with a pattern. Now, I'm not telling you I've seen the evidence that confirms it. I haven't. But it is certainly in keeping with a pattern of Iranian behavior. So it's not exactly a surprise that the finger has pointed very clearly at them. The question now is, what do we do about it? Because, you know, the Saudis are right on this. It's not just Saudi oil, it's all of us. And if anybody wants to know how important Saudi oil, or indeed any oil, is to the UK, just imagine having to fill up at £2 or £3 a litre. And of course, the knock-on costs to people getting to work, to people buying bread and basic goods would be very high. So this is hugely important to the UK economy.
There'll be a lot of people listening to this right now who'll say, this isn't our problem. These are two nasty, murderous regimes. I want nothing to do with either of them. It's not our problem. But I suppose the point you're making about particularly oil prices and knock-on effect, it's going to be our problem.
I'm afraid, Julia, it is our problem. I mean, you've just made a very strong argument for green energy, which is one of the reasons why many of us support it. And you're absolutely right. But the problem is, it is our problem. It's our problem because whatever happens in the Middle East has an effect on us. And we've just spoken about the energy implications there. But Iran's proxy war in Syria has led to mass migration into Turkey, across the border into Greece. And, that's had severe implications on the European Union, which, if we're leaving, that has a huge effect on us. So whichever way you look at it, I'm afraid, the Middle East is too close for us to ignore it, and it's too difficult for us to say nothing about it.
The idea that the Prime Minister didn't have an absolute right to prorogue Parliament, the idea that that was something justiciable would have simply been unthinkable. And I think it is deeply worrying that we're shifting ultimate authority from the people, from the electorate in the ballot box, to a group of people over whom we have no control because they're appointed, not elected.
Does it matter how this court case goes? Does it? I mean, if the court ruling, it could be as early as today, tomorrow, or Monday. I expect it's going to come sooner than the weekend. But if the court ruling from these 11 Supreme Court judges is that the Prime Minister did lie, does that change anything? How damaging is that? There's some calling for Boris Johnson to resign in that case.
Well, look, I mean, every year there is a prorogation. It usually happens, the parliamentary year runs a bit like a school year. So roundabout now, there is a prorogation for a Queen's speech. This has been the longest term without a prorogation
but come on,
since
Daniel.
the English Civil War.
We've heard that. We know there were 5 or 6 days, probably only that, because Parliament wouldn't have been sitting this week for Lib Dem conference, next week for Labour, and the week after for Tory conference. So we know that, okay. But nevertheless, he did do it for political reasons. But does that matter?
Hang on, he has every right. In fact, it would have been a bit weird not to have called for a Queen's speech. And the people who are now protesting furiously about him doing it, only at the beginning of the summer were saying, why aren't we having a Queen's speech? What's Theresa May so scared of? We're massively overdue. We've never had such a long term without a prorogation. So they are being plainly political in their objections. But either way, it is a political argument. And the tradition we have in this country is that arguments like that ultimately are settled by the voters. If you don't like how the Prime Minister is behaving, if you think that he has been dishonest, or if you just don't like the look of his face or whatever, you get to vote against him. That's how the system works. What you don't do is go and ask the bench to overturn a decision that's been made democratically. That's not the kind of country we've been. And if the courts decide now to make this kind of thing their business, we will be a very different country constitutionally from what we've been up until now.
Even if there is a deal, can a deal be done in time for the 19th of October?
Oh, easily done. There's no problem at all. And I think there's a wake-up call of many of my colleagues. I'm rather saddened by some of the positions come out by the parties themselves. The Liberal Democrats saying, don't worry about my Liberal Democrat credentials, but you must now 100% support Remain. Labour in a rather sort of fuzzy position. It's like they're forgetting what they originally stood for as parties themselves. We have to get Brexit forward. There are enough MPs that are recognising that this requires compromise. 25 Labour MPs have actually said, if the deal looks good, we will sign it. The Conservative Party should be a majority in favour of it. The DUP are as well. The numbers are there to get something across the line at this critical late stage. Too many MPs, individuals, or indeed parties, have actually been exploring their own perfect outcome and not recognising they're not going to get that. I realised this some time ago. I, as you mentioned, voted Remain in the original referendum. I recognise that the nation itself is paralysed here. It's split down the middle. We have to do something which, as close to 100% of people can live with. That requires everybody stepping forward from their original anchored position. And I'm sorry to see that so many of my colleagues have dragged this on because they are pursuing either a no deal or a second referendum or an Article 50 revoke. That isn't going to happen. We need to conclude this. I touched on earlier the issues of climate change. There are so many more important things that we need to get moving, and yet here we are stuck. We need to conclude this deal. We're getting far, far closer. We heard the good news from Jean-Claude Juncker saying it is possible. It's the first time I've actually heard him say that. I hope my colleagues will wake up and recognise the damage this is doing to British politics, and they're important to conclude this.
I am very concerned about the fact that a lot of young people are being encouraged to take the day of school, even by their teachers, a lot by their parents. One of my daughter's friends, when her parents took the kid to the last one, she said, are you at the climate strike? I said, have you met me? I feel very strongly about a number of issues. None of those issues do I feel strong enough about to take my child out of school, because her job as a 12-year-old is to be at school. That is what her job is. Do you think it's right that teachers, we've seen some education unions actually giving information, encouraging children to take the day off school, because we could just as easily have this climate change protest on a Saturday and no one miss any lessons?
Yeah, I think it is right. And it's part of course, something that isn't new. This is something that young people around the world have been doing in greater numbers, on the Fridays for the Future initiative that Greta Thunberg started. And they've shown incredible leadership. And of course, they're asking adults now to follow them and support them. I'm loving seeing schools actually doing what one of your commentators just said, which is they are putting on events in schools. And so clearly it's having an impact in the schools. I've got emails from my children's schools saying they're going to have a focus on climate change today. And other schools are encouraging their pupils, and teachers encouraging their pupils to go and join in the climate strike.
You think that's appropriate? Because having lessons about this issue, if the children are interested, okay, absolutely fair enough. You can combine the science, the geography. There's lots to learn here, and people should have the facts. But bunking off school for the day because you feel strongly about something, I don't think is a lesson we should be teaching our children.
Sure. I don't know whether you've been down to the Fridays for the Future events. I have myself, and I've gone down and I've spent time with young people. I've spoken to them, I've supported them, marched with them, I've done Facebook Lives with them, I've interviewed them, and they have shown a remarkable knowledge already.
Have they? Because all the people I see interviewed on the telly know absolutely nothing.
Well, not the ones I've met. I don't, I've chatted to them. Come down with me today, and let's meet some together.
No, I've got a long-haul flight to book. I haven't got time.
But actually, what they are doing in schools is they are learning about climate change in a way that we were never taught when we were at school. I imagine we were a similar age.
It wasn't happening then, of course. Not when I was at school, Jonathan.
It was happening there. And remember the initiatives on Blue Peter about recycling, how it's good for the planet, and the global heating and the ozone layers. It was taught then, and we were just learning all about it. Now they know a hell of a lot more, actually, than a lot of adults I talk to on the doorstep.
But are you not concerned about the level? I mean, we've seen some reports recently about psychological problems children are having. This sort of doomsday stuff. I mean, lots of people listening right now might have grown up at a time when we were told, that there could be nuclear war at any point in the middle of the Cold War. There was lots of doomsday stuff around. A lot of people growing up during wars. But we've got young children now growing up in a world that's safer than it's ever been, where fewer people live in poverty, few people die of disease, people live longer, low infant mortality, fewer people are in poverty. I mean, the world has never been a better place. Being born today is the best time ever to be born, other than being born tomorrow. And yet our children are being told they should be anxious, that they should panic. Everyone's fating a 16-year-old autistic girl who's saying that we should be panicking, that we are in crisis. Now, even the science behind what these people are saying doesn't say we should be panicking. It says says, look, we should be moving to renewable energy. We should be making sure we're not throwing plastic and all our rubbish into the sea. This is all really obvious stuff, and that governments, certainly in the West, are moving towards this now. But to tell children that this is a crisis, that the world is going to end, we've got 18 months, Extinction Rebellion say, to save the planet, that we need to be basically going back to horse and carts by 2025, or the planet's going to die. This is doomsday cult scenario stuff. We shouldn't be teaching our children to be afraid like this, should we?
Actually, it's scientists don't tell us what we should do, but they tell us.
Yeah, they do. They do that all the time nowadays.
But what the situation is, and the IPCC report that came out in October last year said very, very clearly that we've got just 11 years to prevent apocalypse.
But hold on a minute. Those warnings, since about 1979, we've had one of those warnings pretty much every couple of years. We're still here, and the planet hasn't warmed that much, and everything's still functioning, and we're all still alive.
You are kidding me, right? We've just seen extreme weather events around the world. We've seen people dying. We've seen climate refugees. We know that the planet is heating, and we're worried.
We've seen people dying. You know that the percentage of people who die. Well, the number of people who die from extreme weather events is now down by something like 90% in the last 50 years. Did you know that?
Up 1 degree. We've gone up. We're probably going to do a quiz, and we can trade facts, but facts are that we can agree on is the planet has heated 1 degree, that we've got to keep it below 1.5 degrees. We're on course for 3 degrees, and we face feedback loops, which means we'll lose control of it completely when more carbon is pumped out as the planet.
I think you could. Or you also know. You say we're on target for 3 degrees, but we also know that 3 degrees is at the very, very, very top of the reasonable predictions being made, and that every single computer model that has predicted everything so far has always massively overestimated. We haven't warmed anything like to the extent that we were supposed to have warmed by this stage.
Julia, you can go on banging on about...
Was that true or not? Well, I mean, was that true or false, what I just said?
Look,
it was true, wasn't it? It was true.
Let me tell you why these climate strikes are important. It's because...
No, please. No, you said I was banging on. Was what I said true or false?
Well, repeat what you said. Julia, you talk more than I have in this interview, right? I thought I was coming on to talk about the climate strikes. Let me tell you why these climate strikes are important. They're important because people like you are pretending and denying that the science actually exists and we have to do something about it. These young people, Julia, these young people know more than you do about climate change. They have grasped the urgency. It's their future that matters. And why
does my future not matter? I'm only 51. I'm not planning to die that soon.
They are going to be around here a hell of a lot longer than you are. And they are the ones that are going to have to pay the consequences. Now, they are showing the leadership which you and other commentators should have shown over the last 10 years. This is an emergency. The science is undeniable. And you can go on with your crazy conspiracy theories about how...
What conspiracy theory?
People are whipping up into a frenzy that's unnecessary. This is an emergency. The house is on fire. This is an existential crisis. We are facing massive species extinction. People are dying because of extreme weather events right now.
Are more people dying from extreme weather events now than they were 10, 20, 30, 40 or 50 years ago?
You are being so irresponsible in the way
Jonathan, I'm not a conspiracy theorist and I'm not denying science. I'm simply saying, can we have a conversation about this based on some actual facts instead of fear-mongering? You're saying people are dying from extreme weather. Something like, I think the figure is in the region of 90% drop in the fall in the number of more people on the planet, and yet fewer people now die from extreme weather events than they ever did.
Because we're developing some resilience, but we know that that's sustainable. We know that.
How do we know it's not sustainable?
Because we know that the planet's heating. It's going to heat a lot more than it already has. There are going to be more extreme weather events, and there's only a certain amount of mitigation that we can do. And it's particularly those in developing countries, those that are poor, those that don't have the investment, that don't have the resilience that we have in the West, which are going to suffer the most. And those are the ones we should really be worried about. We can trade statistics about how many people are dying every year. We know that extreme weather events are getting worse, that more and more people are going to die. There are going to be massive displacements of people as a result. Vast sections of the world are going to become uninhabitable if we don't turn this thing around. And that is what the scientists are saying.